Hey guys, Jams Mini Mods here, and in today's video I'm going to quickly show you how to make some moon bases. Or in the grand scheme of 40k, it could be any planet that's got a lot of craters and pockmarks and all that kind of stuff, so you can paint it any color you want, but I'm going for a kind of moon vibe with this one. Now, as you can see on the screen right now, the reason why I kind of got the idea for this was I've recently purchased some Leagues of Votan, and a lot of the HQs come with their tactical rocks that are kind of looking like moon rocks, and it's very fitting for the lore of them as well. So I figured, you know what, I'm going to make some bases for the rest of my dudes that will kind of fit in with those HQ units. So let's get straight into it. The first thing you're going to need is green stuff, or you can use milliput if you want to, but personally I'm just using green stuff right here, and I'm just mixing 50-50 between the blue and the yellow. Now if you want to do the entire base of every single model covered in green stuff to do all the craters and that, you might be better off going for milliput because it's a bit cheaper and you get more. Kind of depends what you can get. For me personally, I'm not doing my entire base in green stuff because one, it would take a lot more time and a lot more green stuff, which obviously means a lot more money as well. Especially with kind of Votan right now, needing quite a lot of models on the table. So anyway, once you've got your green stuff made out, you want to get quite a decent amount, roll it up into a little ball, and then place it where you want it to go. Now you can do this in various sizes depending on how big you want your craters to be. So initially I kind of use my finger, just making sure it's all wet, and just flattening it down, smoothing it out. And you will want to flatten the edges down so it kind of blends into the base as well. I'll do that at a later point. And then to get the craters that you want, all you're going to really need is the back of some paintbrushes. Various sizes for the various crater holes, or any sort of kind of rounded tipped object. And as you can see here, I use a bigger paintbrush to kind of get my main crater hole in there, push it in quite deep, and then I'll use a smaller paintbrush end to just kind of get one or two smaller ones around it. And then to add a bit more texture to this green stuff, I use my little silicone tools I've got here, but you can easily use some toothpicks and stuff like that. Now all I do is I kind of poke a few more maybe smaller craters in there with it, and also just lightly dab it around to give it like a speckled texture. But one extra detail I do around the bigger craters is I kind of sculpt in little grooves all around the edges just to kind of give that look of the dirt's all kind of mounded up a little bit. Now one thing to remember is when you push the paintbrush into the green stuff, it's going to make a really nice circle, but you don't want a perfect circle, so use your toothpick or whatever tool you're using to kind of just make that circle a bit more uneven, a bit more broken, add some dips and stuff into it, just make it a little bit more natural. And again, don't forget to really taper down and push the edges of the green stuff into the base, because later when we put the sand on, that'll help it all blend together as well. Now I just go ahead and do as many craters as I feel kind of comfortable with on each base. Like I said, I'm not going too overboard because that just means more green stuff and more work. But now that I've got all my craters and green stuff down and all sorted out, the next step is to add a bit of gravel and sand to it, because obviously, you know, these craters were pretty much mini explosions at one point. So I've got some different levels of sand and grit and stuff like that. I'm using some kind of medium-sized ones to squeeze into the green stuff. And I've also got a couple bigger rocks and that I'll squeeze in there as well, just to give it a bit more texture. You know, getting some into the craters, because if you look at the Votan plastic tactical rocks, they've got rocks and sand, all that kind of stuff in their craters. And as you can see on the screen, I did a few little examples here on other Votan models of mine. Now generally I prefer a couple big craters over having loads of little ones. It almost starts to look a bit more like a Tyranid hive world kind of vibe going on. So you got to be careful of that, but like I said, once you put the rocks and everything, it will work out. And painting, of course. Now speaking of all that, the next step is to connect all these things by putting the sand down. Now you can use PVA glue if you want, it's much easier and cheaper to do, but I personally prefer super glue a lot of the time, because quite often PVA glue can peel and go a bit weird, and I've just got a weird thing about durability as well. So I slather super glue all over this base, using a toothpick to try and make sure I push it into little nooks and crannies. Once again, making sure you get some of that glue onto your green stuff so it blends it all together. Not all the way, you don't want to cover the whole thing, just around the border of the craters and stuff like that. Now on this particular model, I initially put down some bigger and coarser sand bits, but I wouldn't do that on the entire base. especially with these tiny models, much finer sand looks a lot better. So I'll be coming in with the finer sand now to fill out the rest of the base. Now this just once again gives the base a bit more texture and dynamiciness, because at the end of the day it's just going to be a grey base. It's not going to look that interesting if it was just all flat. Now I'm going to go off and prime this base black, because I want those kind of deep, harsh shadows that you get when you see pictures of the moon. And then I'm going to be dry brushing up from dark grey to a light grey. So I'm going to go from Mechanica Standard Grey to Dawnstone to Administratum Grey, as you can see on the screen right now. But later on I'll also be showing I do add a bit more Celestra Grey as well, just to help it pop a little bit more. Now you can even go lighter if you wanted to, but that's completely up to you. Like I said, also it's 40k if you're doing it for 40k, or even Age of Sigmar really. You can make the bases red, you can do whatever you want really. But anyway, I start off with the Mechanica Standard Grey and I do a very thorough dry brushing throughout the entire model. I go back and forth, side to side, try and get into those little craters a little bit so it's just not pure black in there. And yeah, just give it a good once over with Mechanica Standard Grey. Now I come in with the Dawnstone. And for the rest of these colors, I try to just go in one direction. I don't go back and forth, side to side with a dry brush. I just go one direction the entire time. Because once again, if you look at pictures of the surface of the moon, there's always a very strong light from one side and a very stark shadow on the other side, where the light's just hitting it. So I'm trying to mimic that vibe by just going over the one edge. So the one side will be a bit lighter than the other. Now you can actually do this very well with an airbrush, but you know, not everyone has an airbrush, so I wanted to do this a lot simpler for everybody to be able to have a go at it. Now saying that, with the Dawnstone I do still kind of wiggle it around in those craters and stuff like that, just to add a bit more light in there. Now as you see on the screen, I'm doing the exact same thing, but a little bit lighter with a dry brush. Once again going in the same direction with Administratum Grey. Nothing to really see here, it's just the same process. But it was still looking a bit dull, like I said before. So my next step was getting Celestra Grey out, as you can see now. I used the Celestra Grey on the entire base, but I mostly focus on the craters, where there's obviously a lot more light's going to hit them because they're raised off the ground. Like I said before, I could probably maybe just hit the craters with a little bit of a lighter grey than this, or maybe a bit of white or something if you really wanted to go that color. But after the Celestra Grey, it was pretty much done. Now I'm going to quickly go and chuck on a nice little black rim on this base. Was actually thinking of maybe going for a grey for a change, but you know, black always just makes models pop a bit more to me. Then I'll come back with a nice little twirly whirly showcase. And there you have it in all its spacey moon glory. Like I said before, it's very quick, very easy. You don't need anything except for some paintbrush handles and green stuff, and just grey paint, or whatever color you want really, like I said before. And personally, I think for a base that's just basically plain grey and some sand, I think it actually looks pretty decent. It doesn't take the attention away from the model, but it still has enough detail there to catch the eye. Now if you did enjoy the video, you know what to do. You've been on YouTube long enough at this point, I'd imagine. So yeah, just hit that like, subscribe, bell, all that kind of stuff. Once again, I do have YouTube membership, Patreon, all that kind of stuff if you want to put in that extra little bit of support to help keep my bits box full. But otherwise, guys, I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.